Hello, I'm Janet. Sorry about this. I managed to delete all of my files yesterday. I managed to get most of them back, but they weren't in the same format, so I've had to bring up on someone else's laptop. I'm going to hold it most of the time, I think. Can everyone hear me all right? Right, I was going to thank Jen for saying lots of nice things about me, but I don't think she did. So, okay. So, one of the lovely things about employing, can everyone see me before I start, by the way? I can get a bit taller, yeah? Okay. By the way, before I start, if anyone wants a copy of this speech or the slides, and I also have slide descriptions, they will be available in whatever format you would like. So, one of the lovely things about employing disabled people is you often end up learning about a lot more things that you think you're going to. For example, today, as well as accessibility and folk dance, we are also going to learn about how painkillers are affecting presentation when you're delivering speeches. Now, I realise we only have one example right here, but so what I'm going to need you to do is think about a speech or a presentation that you've seen delivered really, really well. I mean, I'm not saying TED Talk level, but, you know, your call. And then whenever you see me reading this, rather than delivering it to you, just, you know, feel free to make a note of that. And with that, I think let's begin. So, to start, a little bit about me. As you can see, or we should be able to see, if this was... yeah, it's on. Should I turn it on or off? Let's see. Oh, it's just reconnecting, I think. I grew up in folk dance. That's me. 1993, 4 years old, with my parents alongside the Flowers of May. I did my first dance out with them at 2 weeks old, and my first dance out with, when I was actually dancing at 14. Because I'm never going to be that cute again, let's go for a close-up. I was always also a bit of a Kaylee fiend, which is how it came to pass that at my first Sidmouth Festival, let's go that way, after dancing almost every available dance, and for those of you that know Sidmouth, yes, I do mean every available dance, my hips began to dislocate. A year later, I was using a wheelchair, but I was back at Sidmouth. I came back with my wheelchair, danced almost every dance again, and yes, I do mean nearly every dance, until I literally took the tyres off and then refitted them mid-dance. I like to think it was the first Formula One style pit stop that happened in the folk world, and it was an ironic reflection of what my body was doing, really. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS. It's a relatively common but hugely varied, and at the time at least, a largely underdiagnosed condition. It causes a bucket full of symptoms which range from the annoying to the life-changing, but most relevant to this discussion are the dislocations of almost every joint in their trauma. These days, a manual wheelchair doesn't work for me, so this is how I do my Kaylee. Side note, there's Jen. I have a special setting on this chair that I programmed specifically for dancing, and it responds quickly enough for me to be able to dance. And if you catch me in a break, I'm very happy to show this off because I'm very proud of it. The one thing that is problematic about this is when I'm doing stuff like a right-hand turn, people do tend to reach for the hand that's on the controller, which when I'm dancing a 200-kilogram machine very closely to other people can be really quite dangerous. So at Sidmouth this year, I attached what I call my K hand to my wing mirror. It really works. I'm thinking of going back with a foam hand this year, seeing if people get the joke. Anyway, when I became disabled, I found that despite everyone saying, "Oh, everything has to be accessible these days, doesn't it?" The world was, let's say, far from it, and this was the kind of access that I tended to find. I found myself kind of working my way in through things that I would call accidentally accessible, i.e. the venue just so happened to have a small enough step that I was able to lever my wheelchair up it, which was a lot easier when I was in a manual wheelchair than this 30-stone beast, I've got to say. I would often have to leave my wheelchair and hang on to the walls to get to the toilet, or make friends with people purely because their shoulders provided a convenient support system. Some people make friends over shared interests, I make them over structural integrity. After nearly 2 decades, I am, let's say, no longer content with this. I've never been one to allow the marginalisation of others, but in the same way that it's always easier to give advice than to follow it. I've dealt with and kept coming back to places and situations that I would have called abusive because I had others experience them. I've also become very good at writing angry letters over the last 2 decades. I even have a folder of drafts saved, ready for the next one. So if anyone is interested in publishing a book called Strongly Worded Emails, please let me know. So I'm now trying to live the advice that I will be giving others. The folk world is built on traditions, and the mindset of preservation can sometimes be a difficult challenge when building a culture of accessibility. The view that things must be done correctly or as they have always been can sometimes smother the need to adapt. This isn't a problem with the folk sector as a whole, but with individual people, sides, groups and organisations. For example, within the same festival, I found Kayleys where I've been sworn at for daring to take part, and Kayleys where I've been accepted with open arms. Interestingly, it's usually the late evening Kayleys that are most accepted. Maybe it's because they've all been drinking, and maybe all I need to do is get resistant people drunk, and we can all have a good time. But if alcohol is the only difference, I think it shows how easy it is to make a difference that makes folk dance more accessible. As a caller or organiser, your attitude towards disabled dancers tends to inform the attitude that other dancers adopt. If you make it known that there is a hearing loop, an accessible toilet, level access, you're also making it known that this Kaylee may have disabled people at it, and if that's a problem for someone, they might be better off elsewhere. What I do believe we should be making everything available to everyone. I heard a lovely phrase that I kind of think sums this bit up. If you're inviting sheep and wolves, it's only safe for the wolves. Making the information about accessibility available also helps set expectations and removes the huge amount of hoop jumping that disabled people often face just to attend. Even if you've got access measures, if you're not publicising, you're not providing equivalent access. Non-disabled people have all the information they need to decide if they want to attend. Disabled people, meanwhile, often have to contact several more people just to find out if they can get in the building. I can often end up speaking to 3 or 4 people about a single event, which can take several hours, especially if you have a phone number, which isn't even very accessible in the first place, given that I've got hearing loss. As well as providing the access information, we should also have a point of contact for access queries. A single point so that it's easy for the customer to to find that information that they need. But we also want to reduce the need for people to use it. Give them a way to ask questions, but also have enough information that they might not need to use it. By this, I mean even if there is no step-free access, even if it's in a tree house and the only way up is climbing a rope ladder, put it in your publicity. Mention how many steps there are and if there are handrails. Let us know what the toilet situation is like. Tell us if I can get to the bar or if I'm going to have to employ a waiter for the night. If you've got a website, this is a great place to add extra details. Think about how loud the event is going to be, whether there are going to be enough seats for everyone, what the timeline is. Accessibility is not limited to wheelchair users. Disability affects people in almost limitless ways. It doesn't need to be daunting. The best way I find to write accessibility statements is to think about how I will be interacting with an event and a space, and to think about what might hinder that. For example, at a Keynote, you listen to the caller, and if you can't hear, that presents a problem. That can be addressed to some degree by making sure the microphone does not cover the mouth, which I have been trying to do. I hope that any lip readers in the audience can still see my mouth. And by using any hearing loops available, another trick I use is to imagine I'm just having a really awful day and what things might annoy me about the event if I had to be there and all I wanted to crawl up under a duvet. In fact, I couldn't sit down. Is it too loud? Do I have to remember too much information? A lot of events we know happen on shoestring budgets in rooms above pubs with toilets down 2 flights of stairs. I know it's hard enough to fund events anyway, let alone secure a level access venue with a hearing loop and an accessible toilet. I know it's impossible to make events fully accessible. I'm using air quotes here because nothing is accessible to everybody. But there is a duty, both moral and legal, to make sure what you're doing is reasonable. Air quotes here because that's the wording in the Equality Act. Make the most of what you have. Make the information available. Look for grants that are available to improve access. You can reach out to local disabled people's organisations. I know that a few around me have venues that are accessible and they also hire them out. And they also, if you speak to them and let them know that you're only able to hire an inaccessible venue, they will sometimes, be negotiable about the price. And very importantly, when accessibility features exist, make sure they are being used. Make sure that the band is not set up by the one-level entrance. If you have headset mics, make sure you're using them. Train volunteers so that the disabled attendees are not the ones teaching them how to use the lift. I am always teaching people how to use lifts and how to use ramps, and it's not that I mind helping, it's that I'm considering charging consultancy fees at this point. We also need to think about the fact that your duty to create an accessible environment does not stop at customers. Your staff and performers need to be able to work somewhere that at best caters to them and at worst isn't actively harming them. Ask performers if they have any access needs, regardless of whether you perceive them as disabled. The things I find most difficult to deal with are entirely invisible, and it's impossible, even if you're a medical professional, to tell if someone is disabled just by looking at them. And even if you've seen someone do something 100 times, it doesn't mean it wasn't in agony each and every time they did it. So, why bother? Fostering a culture of accessibility can be quite a bit more work. So why are we doing it? I don't think because it's the law is a satisfactory answer. We organise events and work in this space because we care about the experiences people have. And to me, accessibility is just part of that. Why bother organising something that doesn't allow as many people as possible to enjoy the experiences that we work so hard to create? I feel that accessibility is joyful. Accessibility allows more people to engage with the things that we pour our time and passion into. and it makes me feel so delighted to know that as many people as possible can be with me when I'm busy having the time of my life. In the end, accessibility is just another way of showing love for and sharing joy with our community.